What's up guys, my name is Axmist, and in this video I'm going to show you how you can script your very own data store script. And yeah, as you can see, if I hit play and load up into this game, you can see that my money, without changing anything, this leader stats int value is equal to 120. So yeah, without further ado, let's get right into it. So the first thing we're gonna do is to add a script into server script service. Make sure it's a script and not a local script. And then we're gonna, as usual, start off with typing some variables. So we're gonna do local data store service. It's gonna be equal to game get service data store service. And then we're gonna make the actual data store that we're gonna save our data to and load our data from. So we're gonna do local leaderstats data is equal to data store service get data store, and then in these brackets, it doesn't really matter what's in these brackets, just have something that's not used before in any script. So I'm just gonna do leader stats data. So same as the name. I'm gonna zoom out a bit so you can see the entire thing, and then we're gonna drop a line and actually start working on our first function. So we're gonna do function on player player added, and then in these brackets we're gonna type player. So whenever a player joins, we're gonna connect this function. Now we haven't connected this function yet, we're just gonna type it like that. We can actually connect it down here. So we're gonna do game.players.player added connect on player added. So now whenever a player joins, it's gonna connect this function. It just makes it more convenient if we want to call this function later on while doing debugging or anything like that. Then we're gonna get a variable for the key that we're gonna use when saving the data. So this key is, I'm just gonna type it out so I can explain it, is equal to player.user_id. So this key is gonna distinguish each individual player's own data store. So we're gonna use this player key to find the specific player's data. So we're using the player ID because the player user ID, because that's always gonna be something original. No player on the Roblox database has the same user ID. So that's why we're using that. Then we're gonna make a variable for the regular leader stats. So local leader stats is equal to instance.new folder, and the folder's parent, as you can see right there, instance, the parent is gonna be equal to the player. And then leader stats.name, I think this is actually important that it's named leader stats like so. And this just creates the folder in which the data is actually going to be displayed. You know, in most common Roblox games you have the simple leader stats data up in this corner, and that's why we need this folder. Then we're gonna drop a couple of lines, and here is where it gets a bit interesting. Now we're actually gonna create each leader stats that we want to save later on. So just for the purpose of showing you guys an example, I'm gonna do local money is equal to instance.new int value. Make sure it's an int value, and then the instance parent is gonna be leader stats, and make sure it's not leader stats data. It's actually leader stats if you name this leader stats data, otherwise you won't have that variable, of course. Then you're gonna do money.name, and it's gonna be named money, because that's only a variable name. It doesn't set the name for the actual instance, so you have to do that manually. And now, actually, just to show you guys that it works so far, I can click play, and as you can see, right up in this corner, you can see it's not too clear because we have this thing right there, but as you can see, it actually says money and we have 0 money. So what we're gonna do next is actually making the variable for the table in which we're gonna retrieve the data or get the player data. So we're gonna do local leaderstats store, and that's it. We're only gonna make an empty variable right here. So actually, don't worry about that red line. It's just because we haven't used it yet. So we're just gonna move on, and we're gonna do something that's called a pcall, which is basically, instead of just making an error in the code, we can actually, it's still gonna run smoothly, but if it's an error, we can actually make a custom error print or something like that. So we're gonna do local success, comma, error, or actually error because otherwise it's something else, is equal to pcall function, and then we're gonna just make brackets like so, and then we're gonna do leaderstats store, so we're using this variable, is equal to leaderstats data, and then we're gonna do update async, and then here we're gonna include the key. I'm gonna explain this all in just a bit. I'm just gonna type this out. Now this seems very complicated, I know. Don't click off the video yet because this is actually not as complicated as it seems. So what we're doing here is we have this empty variable that we're later trying to set to something, and that something is our table, or what's gonna be our table for our leaderstats data. So this leaderstats data is actually the data store save. So get data store, we have it right up there. And then we're using something called update async, which is, maybe you worked a little bit with data before and are familiar with the set async and get async. Update async is basically the same thing, only instead of setting and getting, it's actually only updating. Which is pretty self-explanatory, but it's just easier to use. So you have your key here. This is just to distinguish what data store you're using, because again, the data is equal to the player user ID. And here we have a function. Now this function is the way in the method in which we're actually getting the data. So you have your function right here. And what it does is that it returns this thing called new value. Now, what is new value? It's this variable right here that is equal to old value or nil. And the old value is the actual data store that was already stored on here. So in case old value is not equal to anything, then it's just going to be nil. It's going to be set to nil because it doesn't find anything on the old value, so it just sets it to nil, and it returns the old value. Now, when that is all done, if we had any data on the player, if we had any data saved, then this variable is actually going to be equal to that data table. So we're going to do if leaderstats store, then, so we're just checking if leaderstats store is equal to anything, or we might as well do not equal to nil. That would also work, but it's just extra code and it's not necessary. Then we're gonna make a loop. So if it's equal to something, that means in this case that it's gonna be equal to table. I'm gonna show you later on why. Then we're gonna do for data and then index in pairs leaderstats store do. So this is just a simple loop to go through the table. Actually, we can rename the index to data value just so the script makes more sense, but we're just looping through this table, getting each data with its value. And yeah, this is a very common loop. You're gonna see it in a lot of scripts in the future. Then we're gonna do leaderstats, or actually if leaderstats find first child data Then, so if it finds the data in the leader stats, so for example, if the leader stats was equal to money, money is inside leader stats, so then this if statement would be equal to true. And then leader stats, and then we're just finding the actual data, which in this example could be money. So leader stats dot money. It might as well have said dot money if that was the case, if that is what the data was equal to. But I'm just gonna type it like this because it's simpler. We're just finding the data inside of leader stats. So this is we're getting an instance in this case, an int value. So leader stats data dot value is gonna be equal to data value. So now we're actually done with the onPlayerJoin thing. So whenever a player joins, the player's data is gonna be loaded up successfully only using this function right here. So that's all done. Now it's time for part 2, which is actually saving the data whenever the player leaves. So what we're gonna do next is function on player removing player. So like we did right up here, we're gonna connect this function to whenever game the player removing. So whenever a player is leaving, we're going to do we're going to connect this function. So on player removing, like so. So whenever a player leaves, this function is going to run. So we're gonna do again the key. We're gonna get the key. So local key is equal to player.user ID. Now this key should be typed the exact same way as this key down here, because we're gonna use the key to find the player's data. So of course it's gonna be the same thing. Then we can do make the table on which we're gonna save the player's data. So local leaderstats table is equal to 2 empty table brackets. Then we're going to make a quick loop to actually add all of the leader stats int values to the leader stats table list. So we're going to do for ivy in pairs player dot leader stats get children do. So we're getting all the children in the player leader stats, which is the things we're gonna save. Leader stats table, and then we're doing this thing right here with these 2 brackets. We're going to do v dot name is equal to player, v dot value. So what we're doing right here is we're looping through all of the children of the leader stats, and we're adding them to this table connected with their name and their value. So we can actually use that in the data store down here. Now this is probably gonna be something very confusing to new scripters, but don't worry, it's not that big of a deal if you don't get it, because it's gonna make sense eventually. So we're going to do the exact same thing we did up here. So local success error. Now I'm actually going to show you how you can use these. We're going to do equal pcall function, and there we go. So we have our function all set up. Now we're just gonna save the data using this table. So we're gonna do leader stats data, because that's what I've named my data store value to. So leader stats data colon update async, and of course we're going to include a key, and then we're going to do the exact same thing we did up here. So we're connecting the key with this stats. It's just to distinguish this data store from any other data store that the game might have. So just to make sure you type the exact same thing, you can actually copy everything there from this bracket to this sign right there, and then just paste it into there like so, and then type this function again function, old value, you know how it goes. Now you can retype this, but for the purpose of the video, I'm just gonna copy it, and then we're actually gonna change one slight thing, but I'm gonna show you what that is right now. So instead of doing local new value is equal to old value or nil, we're actually going to change this to the leaderstats table. So local new value is equal to old value. Now we're only setting it to the old value to prevent data loss, and then we're setting new value to leaderstats table, and this table is going to include the current leaderstats of the player. And then we return the new value, and by doing so we save it in here, and we have updated the leaderstats data. And that's actually the entire script done. Now I'm going to show you how you can use pcall functions. So if this script would error, for example, because of an overload in data stores, we can actually make it print out if something went wrong, even though it won't print out normally like it normally would, because this is a pcall function. So we're gonna do if success, then print data successfully saved for, and then we can just put the player name. Else, if success is not equal to, if success is equal to false and it errored, we can do else print error while saving data for player.name. Now this is just a brief showcase of how you can use pcall functions, but basically we can have it, you know, print out whether the data was actually successfully saved or if it wasn't. So this script should now work. If you want to try it in Studio, you have to first of all publish your actual game, and you also have to go into game settings, go into security, and turn on enable Studio access to API services, because the data store service is an API service. So, and actually we can rename this script to something else like data store. But then we can check if it works, so we'll hit play. We can actually change our money value to something else than 0, so we go over to the server by clicking that thing right there, going into our leader stats, our value, opening up properties and changing this 0 to, I don't know, 20 for example, and then we switch back to the client and we leave the game. Now sometimes the data store doesn't work in Roblox Studio, it always works in game. I think that was the case right now. Okay, there it worked. So I don't know why, but I changed the value to 120 and it worked. So of course it will work in game. In Studio sometimes it's just a bit messy, but data successfully saved for random video, and if I hit play now again, it will actually display our money. So there we go. We just loaded into the game and we have 120 money already saved, just logged on, didn't change anything. So that's how you make a data store script in Roblox Studio. If you enjoyed, please leave a like and consider subscribing. I'm really close to hitting 4,000 subscribers, so it would truly mean a lot. And yeah, I have my Discord in the description if you have any suggestions or anything like that. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.